Good morning. Wow. I feel like we can pray and leave. Like that was just an amazing time, wasn't it? I'm like, I want another song here. So glad you're with us this morning. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much for your presence. We thank you for who you are. I just pray that today, this morning, as we worship through your word, that we open our eyes to what you want us to see and confirm to some things that maybe are stirring inside of us, Lord. And so I just pray that as your Spirit falls upon us this morning, that your work will be done in our hearts and our minds. And Jesus, we give you this time. In your name we pray. Amen. So my family, we love our holidays. We love Thanksgiving. We love Christmas. I mean, I don't know about you, but Christmas music has been playing for a long time. In our household, we have, let's see, what's it, Echo? Is that right, Echo? I know there's like 50 million of them. I'm not sure. We got it as a gift, which is great because I didn't have to pay for it. But it's an Echo. So the kids can just like start saying stuff, which isn't so great, right? Play this, play that. And so we've been playing Christmas music for a month. And I guess there's a radio station in this area that's been playing it since, I think, Halloween, to be honest with you. It just repeats over and over again. It's like the same 8 songs over and over again. So we've experienced Christmas, and today is December 1st, okay? Now, Thanksgiving was great in our household as well because my family, my mom and dad, my side family, usually have like this great feast. My mom loves to cook, so we have food left and right. And probably for some of you, you have like your favorite items, right? If they're missing, you kind of like, the kid inside you kind of complains a little bit, right? Let's be honest. And some of those have been passed down from maybe generation to generation, those type of foods. Well, for me, my mom, what I think, is makes the best stuffing. So much so that when Andrea and I moved from Indiana, my mom actually mailed me stuffing, okay? So she made 2 batches of it and put it in a box, freeze-dried it, and shipped it to us. And Andrea was like, isn't that kind of weird? And I was like, Andrea, I don't care, all right? I have stuffing, and you can't have any of it, all right? Because it's weird, so it's mine. But I come to find out, like, it was like $40 to ship because it's in a box freezer. I was like, Mom, like, I love you. Thank you. I wouldn't say don't do it again, but I was like, thank you so much for that. So we actually celebrated Thanksgiving. My mom and dad came down. My brother and his family came down this year because my family is not able to go up to Christmas to see them. So they came down. So we celebrated Thanksgiving on Thursday. And then we celebrated Christmas on Saturday. And then my daughter Macy turns 15 on December 9th, so we celebrated her birthday on Saturday night. So we just partied and we ate and we partied and we ate, and I actually don't know what day it is or what holiday it is. But I'm glad to say that it involved food, presents, and gifts. But it's been a great time. But one of the traditions for us at Thanksgiving is we go around the table and we say, what's one thing you're thankful for? And everyone goes around the table. So we have anywhere from a 2-3-year-old all the way up to like a 65-year-old. So it's interesting to hear the dynamics, right? But when little kids say what they're thankful for, it's like, oh, you know, and the adults get around, it's like, I love you, honey. I love you too. It's like, all right, we get it. Let's move on. So it's fun to hear all the differences. Now, when we talk about Christmas, we celebrated Christmas on Saturday. It shifted to what was your favorite Christmas movie? What's your favorite Christmas movie? So mine is Charlie Brown Christmas, and I have to admit, I do like the little claymation, like Rudolph, right? My kids are like, Dad, that's cheesy, like it's just like still shots. And I'm like, I know, I love it. So then some other favorites were The Elf. Everyone loves Elf. Someone mentioned Die Hard, and we're like, that's not a Christmas movie, that doesn't count. No clapping. It's not even a Christmas. It takes place, there's snow and lights, but it's not a Christmas movie. All right, sorry. But the Die Hard was mentioned. And then a few of the kids mentioned Grinch. We like watching the Grinch. Now, this conversation actually from then on shifted to which Grinch movie do you like? So we have the 1966 classic. We have 2000 with Jim Carrey, and then the most recent 2018 with Cumberbatch and Pharrell doing the narrating, okay? So we went around the room. It was really interesting to see the different dynamics of whose favorite Grinch movie they like. So I'm curious in here. Who likes the 1966 classic, The Grinch? Raise your hand. Okay, you can put your hands down. Who likes the 2000 version with Jim Carrey? All right. And who likes the most recent 2018? All right. So we kind of have 66 and 2000 are kind of even there. In my household, there was maybe 3 or 4 that liked the 66 classic, and the rest love Jim Carrey's 2000 version. But regardless of what version you like, there's no doubt that each one depicts the Grinch as this gnarly, mean, stinky being, right? I mean, the song we just heard starts off as, "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch," right? I mean, come on. Like, if there's a song that was made after you and the first lines in it were, "You're a mean one," fill in your name, you're like, come on, like, at least give me some credit, like I'm trying at least, right? And yet with the Grinch, we see he's depicted as someone who's big and furry and the teeth, right? The close-ups, remember that in those scenes where they do a close-up of his teeth and there's like things growing and moving on? You're like, that's disgusting. I remember as a little kid thinking, man, his mom doesn't make him brush his teeth. Like, it's just gross. Like, and you see this about the Grinch. But yet there's parts of us that also, and this is why I think the Grinch makes a great movie, there's also a part of us that kind of feels pity for him, right? We kind of feel for the Grinch. We retreat when we feel like we're being attacked like the Grinch. I think there's times where we might feel things are unfair like the Grinch. You see, I think when we watch the Grinch, there's actually part of us that kind of relates to the Grinch. And when we are attacked, when there are times where things are unfair, like the Grinch experienced, sometimes we ourselves get our Grinch on, right, in life. So the Grinch actually seeks out to destroy the happiness of those in Whoville. Those in Whoville. We see this. The narrator says this about the Grinch. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. 2 sizes too small. Can you blame the Grinch, though, of his heart being 2 sizes too small? Somewhere along the way, he was misunderstood. Take the 2000 version of a Grinch. Remember the scene where he's treated unfairly in the schoolroom? Where he walks in at a younger age, and with his classmates, he's being made fun of by how he looks, how he smells. Remember, he puts on a lot of cologne after that? Just some like young boys like, dude, just one spray. That's all you need. It can actually do the opposite, all right? When he shaves, he gets all the nicks on his face and walks in to impress a girl, and they make fun of him. He's shunned. He's humiliated. Not only just the students, his peers, but also the teacher jumps in and makes fun of him. And so he learns to protect himself. He learns in that environment to retreat, to survive. He begins to live a life of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It turns out that the Grinch actually learned well how to act in these circumstances. We see this over and over again in the movie. And what it means to return hate for hate, hurt for hurt, and to get back at those that do us wrong. And as it turns out, Jesus had something to say to us about the way the Grinch deals with conflict. You see, Jesus has some pretty radical things to say, like only Jesus can do, right? It doesn't surprise us, Jesus saying radical things. But here he says that we should love our enemies. Love our enemies. Now, for some of you, you probably sit back and say, I really don't have enemies. I might have people that I don't like, or I maybe avoid, or you fill in the blank, whatever it might be. But as you get older, you start to learn well how to reason your way through life by avoiding pain, by avoiding people that might hurt you, attack you. It's just part of it, right? And so in this season, we see Jesus telling us to love our enemies. So you might not have an enemy. You might have a frenemy. You might be asking, what's a frenemy? I asked that same question a few weeks ago to Micah, my son, who's 10 years old. So Micah, by the way, we have a practice in our household that if my wife or I are preaching or teaching in the public setting, that if we use an illustration of one of our kids, we have to pay them a certain amount of money. If we use their name, then it's double because now they're called out specifically. Well, Micah says, Dad, you have to speak 3 times, right? And there's 2 other campuses, so there's actually 5 services, right? I'm like, dude, don't push your luck. I was like, I'll give you 3 because I'm speaking 3 times, but that's it. He walks away, a little smirk on his face. I'm like, punk, man, he got me 3 times. But Micah, we're in a Walmart, and he sees a friend of his walking down the aisle, and this friend's a girl. And she walks up to him, and how I know that she's a friend or at least an acquaintance is that she spots him and locks eyes, and Micah sees her and puts his head down. Remember, 10-year-old boy. I'm like, what's going on? Like, does he like her? Like, what's happening here? And so we're walking, getting closer, and she's like, hi, Micah. And he looks at her, head down with eyes up, and just gives a nod. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you be polite. Like, you need to say hello to her, and you don't just give a nod. You do that to a guy, not to a girl. And I'm like, isn't she your friend? And he's like, well, Dad, she kind of likes me, and so we're kind of friends, but she's also kind of my enemy, so she's really my frenemy. I'm like, your frenemy? He's like, yeah, my frenemy. It's like, interesting. So for some of you, you might not have an enemy. We'll just call them your frenemy, okay? So who is this person that you're struggling with to love right now? Who is this person that you're struggling to love right now? Maybe it is a real enemy. Maybe it's your spouse, or not that your spouse is your real enemy, but maybe you do have some conflict with your spouse. But maybe there's some other people, a coworker, a boss. Maybe it's actually yourself that you're dealing with that is a struggle. But don't miss this. Loving our enemies or frenemies is the core of the Christmas message and the challenge that Jesus presents to us today. If we want to know what Jesus is about and what the following Jesus is about, then the call to love our enemies is as close to the center as we can get with his message. Let's look at this passage, Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. Jesus says this, you have heard it said that an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek. And if anyone wants to sue you, take your shirt and hand them your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Eugene Peterson, in the Message, his paraphrased version, says it greatly with us, especially his language. He says, here is another old saying that deserves a second look. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere? Here's what I propose to you. Don't hit back at all. If someone strikes you, stand there and take it. If someone drags you into the court and sues you for the shirt off your back, gift wrap it and give it to him. And if someone takes an unfair advantage at you, use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more avenging. Live generously. Live a life that is generous. To take these examples that Jesus presents to us literally or just at face value is completely to miss the point of Jesus. Because there is far more than meets the eye, no pun intended, but far more to the blow to the face as well. Because Jesus begins by citing the oldest law. The oldest law. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. This law is known as the Lex Talionis in Latin. It's usually described as the law of retaliation. And this goes as far back as 2000 BC. And this law is pretty simple and pretty clear. If someone has inflicted harm on you, then you have the right to harm them back in that same way. Equivalent injury is what they call it. We even see this law showing up in the Old Testament. In Exodus chapter 21, it says, if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. It keeps going and going and going. So this law sounds more or less like a law of revenge. A law of revenge. However, the fact is that what's actually playing out here is the law of mercy. Because in this time, what would happen is that we see people harming people and then trying to up one on the other. And if you're the one in power, well, you can give it to the person that's less than you, right? And so in this function, in this way of being, there's a system that is taking place, a judicial way of making things level, equal. Now, there's still a process in this that you still have to take someone to a judicial system, kind of like we have today. But what takes place is now it's a level playing field. If I harm you, we go into this court, they figure it out, and then I might have to harm you back or find a way to equal the issue out. And Jesus says, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. There's something more. There's something more I'm calling you to as followers of me. In this, we even see this way of living today. We see this way played out in our own lives. And if you can even go far back as the late 1800s, there was a family that lived in Kentucky and a family that lived in West Virginia that fought over this little thing called a pig, right? You remember the family? The Hatfield and McCoys. Over 13 people died because of fighting over this pig. See, we can one up the other. It continues. Now, it might not be violence, but for some of us, it might be trying to backstab someone, trying to advance our way, status, success. Maybe for some of you, it's social media, or maybe even deeper. There are deep scars that we experience, someone that we are victims of something or someone. And Jesus is telling us that this eye for an eye, tooth for tooth business actually can escalate violence. But yet, we do this all the time in our life. Here are two responses that I think we tend to lean towards when we retaliate, when we live this law of vengeance. See, first one is attack mode. Many times we want to attack someone when we feel attacked. It's natural. It's a human condition. If you come and you punch me in the face, if you're bigger than me, I might run. But if you're not, then I might take you out, right? So I have to reason my way, rationalize it, think through. There's logic. But in attack mode, we think it's up to us. So we fight back. We stand up for ourselves and we fight for our rights. The Grinch did this as well. Remember the scene where he's up in this house in the mountain peak and he looks down and they're happy. They're decorating the who's and they're singing and all this stuff. And he can't take it anymore. He can't take it. So he takes it upon himself to remove those things. So he steals every present from every house. And he just doesn't stop there. Remember in the 2000 version, Jim Carrey's character comes in and it's like a big vacuum cleaner that sucks everything out. Presents, the food, even the little cheese from the mouse he takes. And clearly this is why Dr. Seuss titles this How the Grinch Stole Christmas, because the Grinch took away every material thing that he thought actually symbolized Christmas. And in our own life, when we attack, when we're aggressive, we have to be right. We have to be in control, to have the last word. If you don't get what you want, what do? You do whatever it takes to get it. And there's also passive-aggressive ways to attack. The backhanded compliments, the sarcasm, pretending to compliment someone and then turn around and do the opposite. See, attacking is part of the way we insulate ourselves. The other way I think we do this is also by what we call victim mode, where we think we're the victim, we cower in the corner, we shut ourselves out from meaningful relationships. And the Grinch also did this. Like the Grinch, we swing back and forth between victim and attack, fight or flight, and we do this for a lifetime. Remember the Grinch, how he would go up to the mountain, come down, attack, go back up, and then have conversations with himself? The poor dog was the only one that was listening. In the bed, in the room, around the dinner, you see those scenes, the movie, the Grinch is talking, convincing himself that he's better than the other. When we become the victim, we have a habit of blaming, and we enjoy feeling sorry for ourselves and everyone else we think is better off. You see, we have learned, like the Grinch, how to function in these environments. We have learned well how to function, to insulate ourselves when we're attacked, when we actually might be the victim, and we play this law of vengeance, returning the favor. And now Jesus enters into this scene, in this passage, and messes everything up. He takes what seems perfectly fair by the law of that day, and keeps taking advantage of each other and pushes us to the extreme. And some of us actually question, like, are we supposed to actually do this? To actually turn the other cheek? I mean, is Jesus calling us to be a doormat, to kind of curl up in the ball and just get beaten left and right? Is that what Jesus is saying? I mean, who does that? Who actually in their right mind would actually turn the other cheek? Who in their right mind would get slapped and allow someone to hit them again besides the South Carolina Gamecocks? All right, let's pray. No, I mean, who in their right mind would let someone push them around? You see, in the way that only Jesus can do, Jesus turns things right side up, what we might call the great reversal. You see, according to the Jewish law, a hitman might come by and take you out, or someone might do something as simple as slap you. If someone slaps you, it would cost them around $750 in today's currency. As you say, turn the other cheek, because if you turn the other cheek and they slap you from the back, right? Front and now backhand, it's double. And so what Jesus is essentially saying in kind of a humorous way, if someone insults you, let them give you the greater insult because it's more on them than you. You walk away while they suffer. However, our natural human response is not to do that, but to pay evil with evil, fist to fist, hatred with hatred, bitterness with bitterness. That's the way of the world, and that's the way many of us function, because that's a lot of ways we've been treated. And yet Jesus offers a better way, a higher way, a loving way, a Christ-like way. He says turning the other cheek might not feel natural, but it is right. It is right. Henry Nouwen, author and preacher, says to die to our neighbors means to stop judging them, to stop evaluating them, to become free, to be compassionate. Compassion can never coexist with judgment because judgment creates the distance, the distinction, which prevents us from really being with the other. See, no one died from a slap. It's not so much the physical damage that the slap does, but it's more the physical, or the psychological, the emotional, less than the physical. And really, I think when it goes down to it, it's actually more spiritual, something deep within our soul that we feel humiliated, because when that separation happens, dignity also enters into the scene. Because everyone wants to retaliate. But when we do, we're returning evil for evil, and then that cycle just continues to move and roll. However, by turning the other cheek, we change the subject. We actually flip the script, which is awesome. We actually change what is actually taking place. We actually turn things upside to the right and turn the right side up, because what happens when we do this is that Jesus now begins to enter into the scene, because a lot of times we forget that Jesus is actually present with us, that Jesus is amongst us, that he cares about those that might be attacking us just as much as he cares about you who's being attacked, or maybe vice versa. So when we turn the other cheek, the center of the conflict between me and you is no longer my pride or stubbornness, how I'm right or how you're wrong, because I'm the center of the story. So listen carefully. When we seek justice or rightness for ourselves, we're the center of the story. And this is what turning the other cheek does. It moves from the center of the story, and it moves you from the center of the story and puts Jesus at the center. And when Jesus is at the center, Jesus does not settle for the low ball, what is fair, like the old law is, or like even how many of us function today, because that's not good enough for Jesus. As followers of Jesus, that's not good enough. Because remember that the person who makes you want to go in attack mode or victim mode, when Jesus is at the center, Jesus doesn't settle for an eye, because he wants relationships to be reconciled. He wants relationships to make whole. He wants people to see what they long for. See, many of us, I think we many times believe certain things. We know it, but we haven't actually seen it. When we see things is when we actually start to believe it. We go see it in action. We see what it tastes like, looks like, feels like. And when we see it, then we become transformed. Because I can know a lot of things, but it might not change my heart. But when I see it, something internal begins to happen. And some of those things I can't put words to, but I know something is taking place. And Jesus is saying, put me at the center because I want to make relationships whole. I want to make your coworkers, your boss, your spouse, you made whole again. And this is what happens when we actually turn the other cheek. Jesus is at the center. Broken people are actually brought back together again and made whole. So if it wasn't the Christmas story that we're trying to communicate to people, then what is it? Because I really believe that this part of the message is what people are seeking after more than anything. And we see this in the Grinch, right? We see this in the Grinch, in the movie. We see how the Grinch is looking at people and thinking that that is what's going to change him, the presents, the gifts. But there's something deeper that's happening within him. See, the incarnation, when Jesus became flesh, he ushers in a new day for us. Because when we turn the other cheek, we want to make everything about our story. But when Jesus is actually at the center, then his story becomes our story. We're not the victims anymore because Jesus is already victorious. We don't have to fight for ourselves because Jesus already fought for you, for me. He fought for the people that we don't necessarily like, that attack us. And you know what? He won. Jesus is winning. Jesus is present. Jesus is amongst us. So the question for some of us is that, yeah, I understand that, but actually, what is that? How do we actually do this, right? How do we actually do this? How do I respond to the insults and conflicts that by turning the other cheek? What does that actually look like? What does it actually mean? And my first response is, when I'm insulted or misunderstood, is not to attack. But what if my first thought is, how can I point them to Jesus? How do I point them to Jesus? I guarantee you that the answer to this question is today's version of turning the other cheek. Pointing them to Jesus is today's version of turning the other cheek. When we ask, how can I point them to Jesus, it forces us to put our petty things away of life. Things like kind of countering someone. If you're showing up to the meeting and the person you meet with is always late, so you want to be late next time to show them up, that's petty. If your spouse wants you to pick up your room and you don't, and then they return the favor by trashing the place, that's petty. But there's some deeper things, too, that affect us. But when we point people to Christ, it makes the center of our focus different. And when we really do this, the other person is impacted by it because they see what it looks like to live differently, to act differently, to be patient, to be kind, to show love. And we see this even in the Grinch. Remember the little girl? What's her name? Cindy Lou. And the Grinch was changed because of this little girl. Even the people in Whoville didn't quite like the Grinch. They said to the Grinch, he's up there, he's mean, we're not going to interact with the Grinch, we don't like the Grinch. And Cindy Lou found something special, saw beyond the smell, the meanness, the little heart of the Grinch. She saw something different. And she lived that out. And that bothered the Grinch, right? It bothered the Grinch that he could not get through to this little girl. He got through to the adults down in Whoville, but this little girl kept coming after. And he began to change who he was. So when we ask, how can I point people to Christ? How do we put ourselves in a place to actually interact with people, not to avoid them, but actually to interact with them, to embrace who they are, even if it's attacks and victim, and point them to Jesus, to actually love them, to listen to them, to care for them, to find out where are the hurts that they're dealing with, and through that you actually point them to the true message of what Christmas is really about. And I know some of you are thinking, that sounds all wonderful, but you don't know my boss. You don't know my coworker. You don't know what I'm dealing with. So listen carefully. Jesus isn't asking us to do anything he hasn't already done and beyond. Remember when Jesus was journeying towards the cross? Matthew 26 tells us that they spit on him, struck him with their fists, slapped him around. When you go on to Matthew 27, while he's hanging on the cross, beaten, spirited aside, humiliated, half naked, you hear the Roman soldiers mocking him, saying, "Get down from this cross. If you're the king of the Jews, do it. Come on, we're ready. Bring it. You said this, but show us." But then you also, in the same story, have people that loved him crying in anguish of wanting him to come down, to save himself. So you had people that mocked him, hated him, people that loved him, that wanted him to do the same thing, to provide self-care for who he is. And yet he knew that would have been totally unfair because they have not seen what he's about to do yet. They have not seen what he's about to do. They've heard him, but they don't know exactly what that means yet. And yet for Jesus, there's something deeper. There's something more, something that they could not see quite yet, but they would. And what does Jesus do instead of retaliating? Instead of playing the victim or attack mode, do you remember what Jesus actually says in this time? He says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." As he's looking down, people that he loves, people that hate him that he still loves, he easily could have come down. But he's like, they don't know yet. But Father, forgive them because they do not know what they do. And Jesus is telling us to be the same, to look at people that attack us, that humiliate us, and say, forgive them because they don't know what they do, but you do. And as much as you feel it, as much as you want to retaliate, as much as you want to show revenge, there's something more. There's something more. Do you believe it? Do you believe that I can change that person like I changed you? Do you believe that the people that you're thinking about that attack you, to turn the other cheek and say, I'm going to show them Christ this season? Do you believe it? Because this is a place where we have the greatest opportunity, I believe, to tell the Christmas story, to make Jesus the center of the story, to seek justice for the other, to stop letting it be about what is fair and let it be about reconciliation and the incarnation of Jesus coming, being flesh amongst us, you and me as followers of Jesus. So what if your first response in that situation was to ask, how can I point them to Jesus? And how can I make my story a bigger story, hoping that they will also embrace the love of Jesus and joining in the family of followers of him? You see, I have a tough time, to be honest with you, with this idea. Because everything in me, when I hear things, when I'm attacked, when people say things, like I replay things in my mind. I don't know about you, but it's like a film, right? I replay, and then it festers, and it eats up, and it just builds, and all I want to do is to make it right. And Jesus is saying, no, I make it right. You be the love for me. And that's difficult. It's hard, because it's real. And there's real things that you're dealing with. And for some of us, we are the ones that are attacking the other. And so for us this morning, we have to sit here and think, this Christmas season, as Jesus tells us to turn the other cheek, to point people towards him, how do we point people towards him? You see, God offers such a life to us if we actually choose to follow his ways. God offers such a life to us if we choose to follow his ways. Do you remember how pleased the Grinch was with himself when he stole Christmas? You remember that scene when he stole Christmas, the joy that was in him? Because he's up the mountain, right? At his house, and he's the big bag pulling up the hill, right? The little dog, of course, doing all the work, pulls up this big bag up to the hill. And here's the Grinch waiting to hear the cries, the hopelessness. As he looks down, it's a desolate place, no lights on the trees. And you know what? There actually was brokenness happening in Whoville. What are we going to do? Where's the lights? But then what happened was transformation took place. They realized it's not about the lights. It's not about the presents. It's not about the food. And they made their way to the town center and held hands and began to sing. And that messed up the Grinch. That messed up the Grinch. Because they turned the other cheek, if you will, and they changed the conversation. And as a result, the Grinch's heart was filled with love, and his heart grew 3 times as big, right? We remember that, 3 times. So, this morning, what size is your heart? What size is your heart? Today, as we think about all the areas of our life, where's the conflict and the tension that you're facing? Where do you feel tempted to go in attack mode or victim mode? Who are the people that you are going after? Today, this Christmas season, challenge for you is, may you take the love that Jesus modeled for us, to us, and may we offer it to others this Christmas season. Let us pray. Dear Jesus, as we give this time to you, Lord, as we come and we listen to your word, as you call us to do something that does not make sense, in all reality, it actually does make sense. You call us to be the people that go, that love others, to be your voice, to come alongside people that do attack. You ask us to turn the other cheek, to go the extra mile. And even though we don't necessarily want to do it because it doesn't feel right, we know that you died on that cross for us so we may actually come and love others as you have loved us. So I ask, Lord, that the people in this room this morning as we leave this place, what size is our heart? And how can we be people during this Christmas season can turn people towards you? How can we love others so that people during this Christmas season might find you and understand the true meaning to be a follower of you, Jesus? May we be that voice. May we love others as you have loved us. And we'll give you the glory and the honor. Amen.
Would you stand as we respond together?